Hello and welcome. I'm Uday Pratap Singh. Thanks for being with us on yet another special episode of the NewsX Business World panels on the Indian economy. We are, of course, decoding the current state of the Indian economy, looking at the roadmap ahead, the challenges ahead as well, the recovery path, and also what the government can do to aid corporate India at this particular point. Joining us, a power-packed panel today, we have Rituraj Sinha with us, Group Managing Director at SIS Group Enterprises. Ayushi Gudwani, founder of Fable Street, is with us as well. Daksh Bharadwaj, partner Bharadwaj and Associates, an architect, and of course a town planner is with us as well. Sunandan Bhanja Chaudhary, managing partner, executive access, is with us. Yogesh Kochar of Royster Reserves, he's the CEO at Royster Reserves, is with us. And Shanu Mehta, co-founder of MMC Convert, joins us as well. Welcome all of you. Thanks for being with us. We also have Dr. Anurag Batra, Chairman and Managing Editor of Businessworld and Exchange for Media Enterprises, with us as well. Thank you all of you and welcome to the show. Let me begin with you first, Rituraj Sinha, on your decoding of the current state of the Indian economy. Also, in terms of what the government has announced, how much has that actually helped India Inc. and corporate India?
Well, I think what we are witnessing in the current environment is completely unprecedented. I think we've never had a health crisis of the scale that we are facing in India. It's getting bad to worse, with more than 2,000 deaths recorded just in one day. We're also witnessing probably what could be the greatest and the gravest economic and migrant labor crisis. And since yesterday, potentially we are witnessing the largest border conflict or geopolitical crisis that India has seen in the last 25-30 years or more. I think these are unprecedented times. If I just take a limited view on the government's announcement regarding AATMANIRBHAR Bharat, my one-line summary of that is that it's a lot of great intent, but it's long-term solutioning. I think, the two quick issues that come to my mind in terms of what could be done better is, I think the government is luckily committed to us that it will look at subsequent steps, and this is not the end of it. That's very good to know. And I think the two areas that would need greater attention, number one is to look at this from a demand side. We are looking at a lot of it from a supply side, trying to resolve all the labor reforms and all the other things, which are long-term supply fixes. And I'm sure they will help. But what India also needs is some kind of a demand stimulus. The problem is that, 13 crore Indian households out of 29 crore total households earn less than 5 lakh rupees per annum. A large part of these households are today facing the biggest savings crisis and spendings crisis that they've ever witnessed. That's 13 crore. That's 13 crore households and 34% of gross domestic consumption for India. So I think something needs to be done there. I think what happens in our policy making is that we focus a lot on the bottom 8 crore households, which are all the direct benefit transfer type households, the Kisan Yojnas and the other schemes that the government operates, the food security schemes. That's the bottom 8 crore households. And then there is the next 13 crore households, which generally gets caught in the middle. So when you do tax cuts for corporate India, that impacts the top shelf. And when you do, what the Modi government did in the first round of economic support, 1.7 lakh crore Garib Kalyan Yojana, that was the bottom most. I would like to see a little bit more focus on is the 13 crore households that really drive India's domestic consumption. So that's my one big expectation from the government. The second expectation is that the government has to look at supporting companies, because companies create jobs. You can't help an economy without supporting companies. Cities and large corporates are economic engines. MSME is very important, no denying that, But let's look at the data. India has 6 crore MSMEs, but we have 19,000 companies which have more than 10 crore paid up capital. We have 30 crore non-agri workers, but only 5 crore actually get some form of social security in the name of PF or ESI. We clearly need to support companies to become bigger, and I think vocal for local is a great slogan. Okay. It's very good intent, needs to be backed by a little bit more ammunition.
Okay, fair enough.
Raj, you give those data points and we'll again come back to you. But one thing I want to get from you upfront is, so what could have the government done in the package? If the package was package 1 or installment 1 or stage 1, what do you think are your specific recommendations to the government or inputs? As an industry leader, you're also the chair of bodies and you are the leader in your sector, and you're at a place where you see how other industries are performing and what the leaders there are thinking. So what are the specific interventions that the government can do? Your suggestions?
Well, I think, I'm not the economist here, but just looking at what's happened globally, if you pick up the G20 countries, majority of the G20 countries have come up with some form of job protection scheme, right? They have given stimulus to job creating companies. All these large job creator companies have had a major reduction in revenues. Demand has shrunk. They are going to cut jobs. They are going to cut pay. Unless you step in with a job protection scheme or some kind of subsidy or benefit to these corporates, which indirectly will help save jobs and stimulate, further growth. So I think that's one straight policy action, and that's not from my playbook. That's simply what every other country, from Australia to the US to UK to Canada, seems to be doing. So there's got to be something useful in that scheme.
Okay.
Thank you, Rituraj.
Let's take that to Ayushi if we can. Ayushi, come in here. As an entrepreneur, and of course, speaking for your particular sector, but also for entrepreneurs in general, what are the challenges that you're facing right now? Has government managed to help? And as Anurag Batra there said, what would be the solution that you would like to offer to other entrepreneurs who are facing challenge, and what practically can government do to help companies like yourself?
I think there are two levels of issues. One for us and overall that the economy, and as Rituraj mentioned, is that first bigger issue that we are now facing with is demand. So it is actually the demand which is not coming back and the consumption has stopped. So eventually, government has really made a lot of effort to support a lot of MSMEs. But if you really look at the practicality of the resolutions, they are basically short-term liquidation infusion measures is what government brought in, rather than thinking about how do we focus on circulation of cash in the system. So I think demand creation is a very, very important aspect that we need to figure out. And as entrepreneurs, as the larger companies and everything, all of us together, we need to figure out the economic stimulus that we need from a demand creation point of view. The second action, and I think to what even Anurag asked us is, I think in terms of the stimulus that the government has given, majority of the stimulus has been focused on deferment of payments. So if you will get loans, but you can pay the interest rates and everything. There haven't been any relaxation in terms of actual reductions in, let's say there's a tax reduction, can you not pay the GST? Can government ensure that they're paying the PF and ESI, etc.? So end of the day, a lot of small scale enterprises are basically thinking that end of the day, I have to either pay today or in future. So I might as well cut my losses today and shut down the business. So a lot of businesses in the textiles and apparel industry, especially the SMEs, are in the process of shutting down. Even we, for our sakes, thankfully we are a startup and we are funded, but we have taken any and every measure for cash conservation from day one, starting 22nd of March, because we needed to. But we need much more relief from government in terms of the action on the ground, in terms of the real stimulus which helps us, and third, in terms of demand.
Thank you, Ayushi. I want to come to a real question, and I'll purport it to all the entrepreneurs on the panel. There is a real worry that in the next 30, 60 days, because the past 90 days, most startups have gone to a zero revenue, in certain sectors, and in certain sector to 50, 60, 70% loss of revenue. Plus, they have not been able to raise fresh funding. So do you see that some of the startups in the next few months will fold up? Is that a reality, or it is just a headline?
No, it is 100% reality. End of the day, I mean, majority of the startups have seen zero revenues during the lockdown. Even the revival of revenues is taking time. Some are in a privileged space, so those spaces are working, but a lot of spaces are not going to pick up in the near term. Investors will not be ready to fund. If they are ready to fund the sector, they will also hold back on any kind of valuations, or in terms of restricting the fundings, it will come in tranches and all. So we are looking at a 1 year kind of a risk for startup industry and entrepreneurs as a whole. The ones who manage to have the right profitable elements in place will manage to actually sustain, but they will go through tough times. I mean, that's real. I don't think it's a headline.
Okay, fair enough. Daksh Bhardwaj, why don't you come in here? Of course, the state of the Indian economy, according to you, also for architects and town planners, is there an opportunity here? Because people are going to be looking at individual spaces, bigger spaces to stay in, to work in. So possibly people can be moving into, independent homes rather than shared ones. Also from co-working spaces to owning independent offices. But then there's when you have, of course, a state of contraction and less money in people's pocket, there's also less money to spend. So is that a challenge or an opportunity right now for the town planners and architects like yourself? And what can government do to help you?
I put it in a little different way. I make a few points. What Ayushi just now said about demand. Now, this question of economy and business, I think is like hen or the egg, which comes first. And I personally feel government has to take some out-of-the-box actions. I'll give an example. That, for example, we talk now that China is gone or going slow, India can open up its doors for manufacturers to come in. To do that, there are a few steps which government should think about. For example, clearances. It takes months and months of clearances, right? Give them land at the right place. Give them tax holidays. Then people will come. It's happening in Vietnam, if I'm not wrong. This is one area which I think we should really look into. Then, of course, you've got to think when we talk tax, how many people are paying tax in this country? In a sense, who are supposed to pay tax? It's minimal. So what is being taxed, better, all these high levels. So ultimately, the industry has gone slow because there is no consumption. Startups will probably fold up. But coming to your other point, construction, I mean, I'm an architect. You are aware that principally the biggest job giver, starting from construction, labor, nails, anything you say. And that is suffering for quite some time. Today, people are not investing in houses because there's no return. What are the rentals? You might get loan which is very low, but then there's no consumption, what Ayushi said. There have to be a buyer today. So it can be a good challenge for architects or town planners, subject to they can see on the horizon that there will be people who want to buy. And to buy, they'll have to money. So money means business and economy. Because architecture gets the worst hit. The first one to hit is buildings. It doesn't come up. So challenges are good. It's a good idea. And as a creative person, I can think so many things which we can do. We need not go because land is very, very difficult to get today. And take the NCR, it's so expensive. So I think government has to think in terms of construction, which is in the doldrums, absolutely, it's in slumber. To do that, they have to energize. They've said we'll put funds. But how those funds are going to be distributed, you've seen all around NCR. So there's no buyer. That's my problem. There's no buyer today. So construction can help and boost the industry, boost the economy. Definitely, yes. We are one of those and we're ready to help there. But then these are the things that for anyone to this industry. So this is what will be done.
I want to come to, I'll come back to Dakshi, but I want to come to Sunandan and Yogesh at this point. Sunandan, one of the things is that you come from an advertising background, now you're a headhunter. Jobs are at they're disappearing. We know the numbers that at senior level, middle level, and junior level, many jobs have disappeared. So are you happy with the economic stimulus that the government has given, and what do you think can be done by the government to safeguard these jobs?
Thank you, Anurag, and thank you, Uday. Our business is totally dependent on other industries doing well and every company doing well. And our focus has always been at the CXO minus one level. But if you look at the economy today, I mean, you see there are two issues. One is of supply, the other is of demand. And I think if you look at today, the demand part, which is a bigger issue and will continue to be even after the economy gets back, the industries get back, there's going to be a huge issue in terms of demand because of the huge amount of unemployment. Now, if you look at the total numbers, Uday would have the correct numbers, but in my estimation, about 250 to 350 million jobless in the country today. And if that's the number we're talking about a mammoth number over there who will not be able to go and buy even the basic essentials. So we are staring at a big issue right now. If you look at the economy, the way the stimulus package has been given out, I would agree with Ayushi because she's right. It's deferment of loans or loans that you can take and pay back. But what about the stimulus to ensure that there is demand, the stimulus for growth for industries? So when I talk to industry leaders across industries, one of the things they keep saying, and I keep hearing again and again, is if only the GST was brought down by a small amount. That itself would be a tremendous stimulus in the economy. So that's one thing. The second, and I would agree with the other person on the panel saying that in terms of growth and helping India, you see, if you look at, I think Rituraj was the person who talked about it. I feel that very important thing is to look at India itself and the companies here, because charity begins at home. You got to help the companies in India, and you got to look at what you can do to provide that stimulus. So I think going forward, it is critical to help these industries so as to bring in greater supply and get them going, and on the other hand, to create demand at the same time.
Yogesh, you want to make his opening remarks. What are your opening remarks in response to the economic stimulus? Does it work for entrepreneurs? Does it work for the economy? And what more can be done? Yogesh Kochar?
Okay. So, I personally feel that in the current scenario, and with due respect to all the panelists here, I feel that it is typically the case of those 8 or 7 blind men around the elephant. Okay. And we have an elephant in the room and we're not even trying to recognize it. And we're trying to touch the tail and we're saying, hey, this is a snake and there's something else and so on and so forth. These are conjectures. More than our conjectures, I also personally feel that the government is conjecturing quite a lot. They've got to come down to the, they've got to come down to the ground level and then talk about things like, even if it is AATMANIRBHAR, it's not going to happen. Why it's not going to happen is because imports are coming into the country and imports are much cheaper. The local competitiveness is just not there. There is no impetus to a fellow who's running his lathe shop inside of a place called Batala in Punjab for him to be able to create goods and services that he can sell at a competitive rate. Intellectual property rights have never ever been taught inside of our institutions. Nobody knows whatever it is. So this is a very, very good time. It's a great opportunity for the government to start focusing on something like this. It is our Indian boys and girls that have gone ahead and created the Googles of the world and the Facebooks of the world and the Microsoft. I have personally been part of the leadership team at Microsoft India. And I know, and I'm proud of the boys and girls that, work inside of Microsoft up there in the US.
Yeah.
Nobody, not even Infosys, and I would like to quote even Mr. Narayana Murthy, and I had a discussion with him once, and I said, Mr. Murthy, you went ahead and created only cyber coolies. Why did you not invest into R&D? It doesn't just justify you to be staying in a 2-bedroom house and saying, hey, no, listen, I'm a good guy, but you could have done so much more for the country. And that's my honest opinion. And as far as the economy is concerned, there's a larger issue though, and on that I'll rest my case. Guys, we are only talking about numbers and we are only talking about economy. This economy means nothing to that fellow who has just trudged a 1,000 miles journey back to his house. The last time you saw an exodus of that kind or that mass movement of human beings was in partition. During partition, people did not have to travel no more than 50 miles, and they were across the Lahore border, and they were in Amritsar, and they were taken care of. Even if they had to travel to Delhi, they were taken care of because they were in their own country.
Yeah.
We haven't really gotten down to understanding, hey, what is it that's happened to that boy who has trudged a journey of 1,000 miles back with his father on foot. He's left his friends and everybody else behind. A very, very, and the biggest casualty of this entire economy thing is the emotional casualty. That fellow who was your trusted aide, that fellow who was your trusted housekeeper, that fellow who was your maid servant, she doesn't care a dime. You watch till she comes back to you. She's going to be eyeing each and every single thing that you and I have in our homes, and she's and then.
But that's if they come back. That's if they come back is another big question, because that's something else that would have to be considered. So the human impact has been intense. I'll come back to you. I'm running short of time because we need to take our first break, and then we'll open it up, of course.
I just wanted to make one sentence, which is this: that if they don't come back, which they're not coming back, the supply chain management in this country is terribly disrupted. So guys, get it. We can't just be running a factory just for the sake of producing goods.
Indeed.
Because the factory.
So that's something we've been considering on our other panels, that reverse migration needs to happen, and the slow pace of it obviously is impacting industrial output as well. And Mr. Chaudhary, you were talking about unemployment earlier. The good and the positive sign, though, regarding unemployment has been in the latest figures just released for the second week of June, that the rate has come down from 17% to 11% as the unlocking continues. So obviously that's another positive sign that's happening in these unlocking phases. The Prime Minister spoke about more such signs in his meeting to chief ministers, with exports also finally going up, but a lot more needs to be done. And we look at all of that after the break. But Shanu Mehta, let me quickly get you in on your opening comments. The challenges that you faced as an entrepreneur for your sector, and what the government has done so far, and what you still expect them to do.
During these unprecedented times, I think the first thing an entrepreneur would do is segregate what is wanted and what is unwanted, what is needed and what is not needed. So as an entrepreneur, we stepped in and did the same thing. And when that happens, which are the employees who are valuable to organization, which resources need to be allocated, which resources need to be shared. When all of this is happening, definitely few jobs, few people have to be let go, because the cash has become king right now, and the profitability is the most important thing. If you're profitable right now, it means you have survived it. Mm-hmm. So I'm sure many entrepreneurs like me would have done that segregation. Now, what US had offered, like a paycheck protection program, where what they did was that if you can keep your employees for 3 months, the government was giving you a loan through which you can pay all your employees. And if you do not send any employee back home, the government will let that waive that loan, which I think is a wonderful package which could have helped many entrepreneurs like us, because we need to keep people in our organization and support them in these crucial times. So I believe as an entrepreneur, my trouble was that I had to segregate the wanted and unwanted, and resource allocation had to be done accordingly. But if there was some package which we contained in ourselves, but if there was a PP or P program, how it was in US, it would have helped many-fold to many such entrepreneurs. And the second thing which I wanted to touch was there's a big informal economy in India. I think the support to that economy has not reached their pockets. So definitely they don't have the disposable income. They take this shock. They're more vulnerable to this economic shock. So I don't think the money from the relief packages reach their pocket, because on the ground the problem is, I have a couple of employees who had reached out to government bank for loans, but they say, show me the income tax return for last 3 years. And they say that we still have time to file this year return. And the bank says, no, that's government policy. We have our own say on it, but we want the 3 years return. So I'm trying to say there is a gap between what government has asked banks to do, but what banks are doing. So okay. Before I go across to Dr. Batra to ask some specific questions, Rituraj Sinha, let me come across to you at this point, because
we were doing a similar show with eminent panelists yesterday, and one of the panelists, who in fact is the head of Agarwal Packers and Movers, one of the main logistics companies in India, made a point. He is fearful that there could possibly be social unrest in certain pockets of the country as a result of unemployment and as a result of the current lockdown and the economic crisis. In this regard, is there an opportunity then for security companies like yourself? Will that be something that possibly truck drivers will need as security for themselves as they maneuver their way through the country? Also for other companies, wherever they are, workshops, factories, and whatnot. So your reaction, of course, to that comment by the head of Agarwal Packers and Movers, do you agree with that? And is that an opportunity for security companies like yours? You'll have to unmute yourself as well. Yeah.
Well, look, there's two things that I have to say to that. Number one is that, as regards to private security or facility management or cash logistics, the services that our company operates, these services are what was termed as essential services by the Ministry of Home Affairs. So these services are operational throughout the lockdown period, just at par with e-commerce or banking or healthcare establishments. So these services continue. We haven't had a demand dip. Responding to what you were mentioning about people fearing unrest, I hope not. I think that is not a demand trigger. That's actually a collapse of the economic system. So I fear that such a day should come, and I think as of right now I have no signals to say that truck drivers will be needing more security. But yes, it's a matter of fact.
He mentioned yesterday that his trucks were looted. He said currently it's one truck a day, people on highway, and he said the robbers they came in cars and they robbed it. So he multiple trucks.
Anurag, I'm sure that he's speaking data of his own company. SIS has 2,300 cash carrying vans. Nothing can be more valuable or lucrative to loot than that. We have higher risk. We are planning for higher risk. Obviously, economic disparity increases petty crime. Yeah. Right? And when economic disparity is married with large numbers, large population, then obviously it could result in a greater risk of such incidents. But I think these are too sparse and few, in number to actually call it a trend of any kind. Okay. I think what India really needs to look at there is the larger question. I mean, what Corona has done is brought to fore the big problem in our labor situation. You have 55 crore labor force in this country, 25 crore are agri, 30 odd crore people are non-agri. Mm-hmm. Only 5 out of the 30 odd crore people are in some form of social security net with minimum wages, PF and ESI. Remaining 25 crore work in unorganized sector. Large part of them are self-employed or self-exploited rather, because they work too hard and earn too less. So what this is brought to fore is that larger question. India needs to have a larger social security net than it currently has. And people who are ransacking and doing things like that are people who are basically daily wagers. They've lost their jobs, they've lost their savings. They don't know when things go back to normal, and they're just struggling to feed their families.
Valid
point. At this point, I want to ask you this question, which is a little contrary to what people believe. Is that people believe that this labor, this daily wager will never come back because they fear for their life. But my hypothesis, and possibly your hypothesis, could be that because the opportunities will be lesser, because the economy activity, their possibility just to keep their families feeding will come back. So what is your view? Because you have, where you are, you have a bird's eye view on that.
Look, I think, it's a very simple thing. People run away from villages. they don't run towards cities, they run away from villages because there isn't enough jobs to be had there. A laborer who was in some part of Bihar on a daily wage was getting 300 rupees pre-corona struck. Today, there are so many people back in villages. More than 50 lakh people have gone back to Bihar alone, maybe more than 70 lakh to UP. Today the same job or the same daily wage is earning 150, 175 rupees against 300 because there's an oversupply and there is less demand for labor. So I think that is a problem. But then also, let's not look at a problem out of context. Let's put it in context. So a lot of workers have gone back. Agreed. Migrant labor is a crisis. Agreed. But then how many migrant labor is there in India? Maybe 5 or 6 crore out of 55 crore. That's all. 10% of our labor force or 12% is migrant. Maybe half of them have gone back. But that's 1 to 2 crore people. That is a grave crisis. I'm not trying to undermine the humanitarian crisis at all. But what I'm saying is that the way to solve the problem is not to do more Manrega. The way to solve the problem is again what Ayushi was saying or Shanu was saying, that we need some kind of a payroll protection, job protection type scheme to support the 3 lakh small companies that India has.
Okay.
And the 15,000 odd medium-sized companies that India has. These are the real companies that create massive jobs.
No, true. You mentioned that earlier too. Company support, direct company support needed. Okay, before Anurag Batra, comes in, Daksh Bhardwaj, you had a point to make. You've been
what Raj is saying, I can tell you of our own construction. Most of our labor comes from Bihar, right? Today they've gone. There's no labor. My fear is that construction activity again means supply and demand. There's no demand. What will they come and work on? So that labor force, which is quite major, especially in the NCRs, basically all Bihar, in some parts of UP, is not there. Will they come back? Will we be able to give them jobs in construction? Construction is almost standstill. You know about this. That's one fear. But I want to make just one brief point, as I said earlier. If we have to invite people into this country, I'll give you an example of Anurag. In one of his shows, one of the people at the Pier Hotel said to get a hotel license, you've got to go through 150 licenses. Who the hell is going to wait 150 licenses here? The government has got to get its act together. We must give good time, one window opening. This is what I feel, because after industry and business, that's my point. One has to look into seriously.
Yogesh, Yogesh, what is the solution? We now know what the problem is, but give us the solution. What can the government do? What can the entrepreneurs do? What can the civil society do? Yogesh Kochar?
So he raised a very valid solutioning, which is this, that the single window clearance system, which has been touted for years and years, has never been a single window clearance system, right? Nobody knows what happens within the government. It is so labor-intensive that, it's very difficult to understand and go through that entire maze. It typically is the maze. So I think one is that in order for the government to be able to invite foreign investment, which is critical at this point in time, because you couldn't be creating more jobs, you couldn't be creating more money out of the same economy. Economy is badly hit. We may be sitting on top of some $500 billion by way of reserves, but that's not going to sustain the economy, and that's not sufficient at all to be able to sustain the economy. The larger challenge, I personally feel, is behind our back. But it's the impact of that challenge is ahead of us. So the larger challenge was migration, migratory labor, disruption of labor, disruption of supply chain. The impact of that is restoration of faith between these people who have gone back to their villages. And I'm essentially talking about the emotional side, the emotional, the emotional balm that the government will need to apply on some of these people to say, hey, listen, we apologize. Somebody needs to stand up. And, the Prime Minister is a great guy. I don't think he would want to not stand up and say, listen, I'm sorry, but we had to do what we had to do. And I'm certain, rather than saying you guys have been great, nobody's been great. Everybody's been pushed to the wall and everybody's had to trudge their journeys back to their villages, etc.
Okay, so, fair point. Mr. Chaudhary, why don't you come in here, Sunandan Chaudhary, because while Rituraj Sinha and Shanu and Ayushi spoke about company-specific measures that are needed, what about individuals, employees? and other consumers? What is needed to boost their sentiment, to get them to begin spending again?
And just to build on what Uday said, Sunandan, that when the lockdown started to open, the confidence in employees to come back to office is close to zero or zero.
Yeah.
Employees are worried to come to office. There is a fear factor. And if that fear factor doesn't go away, it will impact productivity. It will impact every part of the ecosystem.
Correct. That's why I said emotional.
You'll have to unmute yourself.
Sunandan?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, Uday, I think clearly the biggest issue right now is also the confidence that these guys have, in terms of getting back employment. I read a news article, I think yesterday, where it's one of those views that, and it seems like 30% of the workforce today currently will be finishing off all their savings by the end of the month. That's a worrying number. And if you look at the number of people unemployed as of today, although you're saying that, the unemployment numbers are getting back, and we are now on the uphill in terms of more employment happening, I'm actually really, really worried about the social fabric and the impact that will have on society, because with the number of people who are used to a certain income, they are not able to buy even essential commodities, and therefore imagine to what length they can possibly go in order to feed their families. So I see a huge issue in terms of law and order. I think the only solution right now is for the government to step in, the biggest player, the one with money, to go and help organizations, the Indian companies which are there, and ensure that they get enough support in terms of maybe reduction of GST or helping in the supply chain and helping in getting more automated. But at the same time, government can invest in the large sectors, the big sectors, in the infrastructure. In fact, in my mind, education is also part of infrastructure, and build on that, reskilling as well, simultaneously. And it has to go hand in hand. And government has to step in to fill in that void. Sooner or later, all industries will come back. Some will come back much later. Hospitality, travel, and maybe real estate will take a little longer to come back. But eventually they'll be back. Maybe it'll be 6 months, maybe a year, maybe a year and a half. But will the employment come back? I'm not too sure. A lot of companies in the current situation, I can tell you, very large companies, tremendous brand equity, they are not currently taking measures to reduce workforce because they're being kind to their current employees. But given another 3 months, you will see a reduction because they're going to be right sizing. And I hear this across industries from lots of leaders that, they would look at right sizing sooner or later. They've realized that this is how the organizations will be able to create more profit. So that is another danger that is going to come. There would be more and more people jobless.
Okay.
This issue is snowballing. This is a big issue, it's snowballing.
Shanu,
Thanks.
Shanu, you and Ayushi are the entrepreneurs on this panel.
Yeah.
Tell us, there is a view that Indian entrepreneurs can thrive on frugal innovation. They are very resilient. And as entrepreneurs, we grow with or without the government. So really tell us, as an entrepreneur, you said that you're conserving cash. Ayushi said that you're focusing on what is essential, what produces revenue, what produces performance. Tell us, as an entrepreneur, what is that you are doing which can be valuable to other entrepreneurs watching the show?
So there is so we also run a hotel, and there is one. I think there are a couple of hotels which have done such. They have taken these alternate vertical revenues. So I was reading a couple of days ago that a hotel in Chennai, what they did was the housekeeping services were intact. The laundry services were intact, but obviously they could not offer it because there were no guests. So what they did was they offered the service to the area around them. They created 256 touch points and they safeguarded each touch point where a human touch is required. And then they offered housekeeping services to the people around their vicinity. And this is a very good way to generate alternate vertical revenue. So I think these are wonderful times where you can innovate that what are the alternate revenue sources which you might not be thinking when your hands so full. Initially, in our service, there is like a lot of compliances were required, and if you have 0 transaction or 100 transaction company, you have to comply, right? So what we did was that we offered them for 3 months. If you have 0 transaction, there is no service, and then you can pay us later. Along with that, people started preparing for future, and they came to us that right now we are free. Let's just do it for free. So all I'm trying to say that these times they make a good base in order to look for alternative revenue sources, which you might be missing when everything is normal.
Okay. And Ayushi?
For us, sorry.
Yes, Ayushi.
Please, quickly, yeah.
No, so I mean, I think 2-3 things. And first thing, as rightly Shanu mentioned, I think as an entrepreneur, the first big focus is to focus on building the revenues back. Second is cost cutting, because if we know that we create the demand, we'll be able to sustain the cost structure that we have. So as Shanu mentioned, like we've been very agile. All startups are very agile. We were a textile and apparel manufacturing company. We repurposed within a very short time frame to make masks. That becomes a very quick, simple revenue stream for us. It doesn't help us gather.
And also you're also helping the community.
Exactly. And we distributed, we donated, we do this. But I think the question is, how do you use the existing resources to contribute to the situation and at the same time also look at revenues? That is one part. Second thing I saw was, which is a very beautiful aspect of startup ecosystem, is that we all supported each other. So entire startup ecosystem, this entire vocal for local campaign or any campaigns we did, you will actually end up seeing that within the startup ecosystem, there have been tons of cross collaborations, focuses and support on the small businesses, and everyone has come together with that frame of mind. And I think that's
fantastic. I think that's a great point you've raised, that everyone has come together as a family at this point. The whole startup ecosystem. Go vocal for local, of course, a great pitch that we spoke about earlier. But also, as you said, the mantra right now should be innovate. Look at this situation, devise a solution like entrepreneurs have always, contribute and generate revenue for yourself and create jobs. I think that should be the mantra right now. We're almost out of time, so let's start our last rapid fire, Dr. Batra.
Sure.
So, I'll start with, the person who was the last in the first go. And I would like to know in your view, where will be the economy in 90 to 120 days from now, 3 to 4 months? So have we seen the worst yet in terms of economy, or is the worst yet to come? Or after 90 days, we should start getting back to the old normal. So we will start with you. We were last with you. So we'll start with the lady that was the last in the first go with you. Shanu first.
Yeah. So basically,
Indian economy 90 to 120 days from now. Good, bad, or worse?
I think it's going to be better, definitely.
Because and why do you feel so?
We have seen many great recessions. We have read about them. There have been great recession in the US. We have had the recent 2009 crisis. But I think after all, the whole human equation, it is based on creativity, collaboration, and communication. And we can only stop it for a very limited time.
Okay. And Point taken. Yeah. It's a rapid fire, so you're going to have to give quick responses.
Indian economy 90 to 120 days from now.
So I'm very iffy, Bhatti. Trade and commerce is essentially a function of supply and demand, and these two
and consumer sentiment.
Yeah.
Well, essentially, what I'm saying is sentiment also comes later. You have to have the money for you to have the sentiment to go buy a watch, right?
Sure. So
all I'm saying is that these two things go hand in glove. They have to operate in a tandem sort of a situation. It's the chicken and the egg. Government definitely hasn't done as much as it should have to see, hey, which sector are they going to look at? How are they going to go ahead and help the laborers come back into the economy? Labor is not a resource, it is the source. So I'll rest my case on that.
Oh, Mr. Chaudhary. Again, you unmute yourself.
Thank you. I think we are on our way up. In fact, I think things are going to get better and better. Some of these industries, which I talked about earlier, travel, hospitality, etc., need that additional stimulus from government. And that will be a huge catalyst for these industries to grow. And believe you me, it's going to be back to normal. And I don't know what's normal about these days. In fact, Anurag and I were chatting the other day, and I was telling him that, what's normal? It's more the normal. Today is that, it's the new abnormal today. I think we'll get back to our old normal. And that'll be the new normal, so to say.
Okay.
And I think it'll take maybe a year and a half. We will be back to purchasing everything.
But not in 90 to 120.
Not in 90 to 120 days.
Point taken.
Certainly help is required.
Mr. Bharadwaj.
See, one of the aspects will be Corona. It's going to play a part. But I personally feel all the proposals which the government has put in, they have to be put on fast track, real implementation. That takes place, I think we'll be going upwards. So the speed of implementation.
Ayushi?
I think recovery is early 21 January. So not 80 to 90 days or 100 and thing. But overall, I think with the sentiment, people will uplift it. Can there be more things to be done? Answer to it is yes. But I think the mindset is very clear. Everyone wants to push this forward. So hopefully we will see a lot of impact coming in.
We started with you, Rituraj Sinha. We'll end with you. Where do you think the economy will go to in the next 90 to 120 days?
Well, if you look at the historical patterns, I mean, India in the late 90s, the Asian crisis, or even the global financial crisis, India always has had a V-shaped recovery. So that's one statistic. But the second and the not so pleasant one is that I think we are yet to see the worst of Corona. The pandemic, we are as a country staring at peaks in the next 2 months, and they're not behind us. So while I have every reason to look at historical evidence and remain optimistic, I would remain very, very cautious, because I think Corona, when it will peak is the big question, and the damage it will do by then to the economy is a subsequent calculation. So for me, FY21 largely is a washout.
Okay, so what you're saying is, rather than look at today plus 90 days, look at peak plus 90 days when the peak comes.
Minimum.
Yeah, I think, if you look at the statistical models, from the day you hit the peak and you start to decline, it will take 60 to 90 days for it to be under control.
Yeah.
So we are 90 days away from, at least 90 days away from when we can say that Corona is under control.
And restarting the economy, so to say, in a full-blown way.
So I think that it's going to be a tough.
Cautious optimism. Rituraj Sinha says cautious optimism post 90 days. The next 60-90 days are very crucial.
Okay, well, fair enough. Thank you so much. We're going to wrap up there. We're out of time, but thank you to all of our panelists for joining us. Thanks to Dr. Batra as well.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.